The following is paid advertisement and does not reflect the opinions of this station. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. The information presented in this program is general and is not intended to be legal advice and should not be relied upon or used without consulting a lawyer to consider your specific circumstances.
Questions about law, stories from the courtroom, cases that might impact your life. It's time for Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn from Cook, Barquette, Ponder, and Wolves. Find them at cbpw-law.com. Here's Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn.
Good morning and welcome back to Tell Me I Have a Case, the show where we invite you to take a second look at the world of personal injury law. I'm Matt Glenn alongside my partner and colleague Dan Grimm. And today we're going to be talking about, does your insurance company really have your best interest at heart? And joining us today is our newest partner, our newest lawyer, Jacob Lawrence. Dan, introduce the folks to Jacob.
Jacob, so glad you got to come today. Tell the folks a little bit about yourself.
Morning, guys. Thanks for having me. Appreciate making time for me to be here. I'm really excited to be here. Well, from Springfield, Missouri originally, and moved to Cape Girardeau to attend school at Southeast Missouri. Wanted at that time to continue playing baseball somewhere, and SEMO provided that wonderful opportunity to pursue school as well as continue to play baseball.
You play baseball, what position?
I was a pitcher. Yep, I was a pitcher, and
Did you bring the heat?
yes, I did at times. And you know, SEMO just provided that opportunity for me. It was a way for me to continue to go to school and pursue an education, and also pursue baseball on the side, which was my favorite thing to do at the time. You know.
What years were you there?
I played here at SEMO in 2015 and 2016. 2016 was a conference championship season where we went to the regionals. And then that was my senior year, ran out of eligibility that year, and, of course, was looking for my next step in life at that point. Had the opportunity to play professional baseball that summer following my senior year, which again was a great opportunity and learning experience. And then as fate would have it, was presented with the opportunity to go to Mizzou Law School that fall, following the senior year at SEMO.
Awesome. So what drove that decision then to go to law school? I mean, is that something you always wanted to do, or is that something that was relatively new for you?
You know, at that time, I kind of thought I wanted to be a sports agent. You know, I had been playing baseball my whole life, and I thought that was something I might want to do. But again, it was really more about the opportunity of going to law school and finding a career that would be both something I could be passionate about, but something where I could also be helping people that would be rewarding. You know.
Did you have anyone in your family that ever pursued a law school education prior to you?
No lawyers in my family. I was the first one, and again, you know, I didn't really know what I wanted to do. I just thought sports agent would be a good idea. I had no idea what a sports agent did on a daily basis, so I didn't have much information.
Did you at least watch a paper chase?
That came later. At that time, no.
That tells you all you need to know about law school.
Right. What's law school like these days? I remember going, but it was it's been a decade or two.
Yeah, you know, when I was at Mizzou, first of all, it was a great experience. You know, I learned so much about myself and our world, really. And it's cutthroat. It's very competitive, and it's a grind. You know, you are busting to get everything done. And like I said, it really taught me a lot about myself as well as the world.
Yeah, I think a lot of people don't realize when you go to high school, you go to college, you're in with people of all different sort of intelligence levels and all different levels of accomplishment. You get to law school and suddenly you're in there, you know, with kind of the best of the best. And not only that, they don't just give you a grade, they give you what they call a class rank. They basically put you all in order, like, oh, well, you're the best law student, and then you're not so much. You know, your grade point average will make a really nice golf score, is what we used to say in law school. That can be eye-opening for a lot of people.
It was for me too. You know, my peers in law school were all extremely smart and extremely hard workers. You know, it was very, very different from college. That was a big transition.
I think in sports, I mean, same thing. I mean, going from a D1 school to actually go and playing professional sports, whether it's baseball, football, soccer. Mm-hmm. I mean, just only a few make it because the talent pool is so finite.
It is. You know, it's about that opportunity that those things provide for you. You know, every time there's a big transition like that, that's an opportunity. And looking back, it's funny. I hadn't thought about these things, you know, till you guys started asking me. But looking back, I'm so thankful I made those decisions and pursued those opportunities instead of closing them off.
Yeah.
Did you even know anything about, obviously, what we do now is civil litigation? What'd you think as far as civil litigation? Did you even know what that was?
At that time, I was a history major in college, and at that time, I thought lawyers were, criminal lawyers
Right.
and prosecutors, defending a criminal or prosecuting a criminal. And so, yeah, like I said, going to law school just opened up that whole new world to me, that there's civil litigation, which could be personal injury. It could be breaches of contract or business litigation type things. It could be estates and trusts. Anything like that. I really had no idea. And again, it was about seizing that opportunity, allowing myself to be opened up to these new worlds, and then pursuing the opportunities in accordance with that opened up at that time.
And I think that's what can be so beneficial about law school is no matter where you fit in a particular law school class, the law is so diverse. There is something that matches up with your skill set. And I remember when we interviewed you, I think was it 2018 or 2019, somewhere in there?
Yeah, 18.
Yeah, I mean, there was a sort of driven confidence that maybe came from your days as a pitcher that we thought would translate into civil litigation, and that of course is what we do. Now, we talk a lot on this show about insurance companies, usually in the context of personal injury litigation, and certainly a lot of what we do has to do with personal injury litigation, but there are also other types of cases that we handled, and you referenced a business litigation. One of your first big cases when you got there, you joke we tend to baptize lawyers by fire. Well, this was literally by fire. This was a house fire case that you had where you represented the homeowner against their own insurance carrier. How did that case evolve?
Yeah, so you're exactly right. It's not the typical case you think of when you think of civil litigation. And so the way that this one originated was that, there was a house fire. Our client, who was an electrician by trade, his house burnt down in the middle of the night. And he was there. He was home at the time. And he had his daughter, who was in high school at the time, also home with him. And he had an uncle who was visiting and staying at the home at the time. And they all went out to dinner that night. They got back. They hung out at home. And as they slowly, one by one, went to bed, each one started noticing this smell. And they came out to the living room, started discussing, well, it smells like something electrical is burning, but they couldn't locate where it was. They were searching all around the home to try to find where it was. And eventually, the uncle was the one who first spotted the fire in the attic. He found an area of the attic which was flaming and had really big smoke at that time. So, as soon as they find that, they're, running around. It's pretty chaotic in there, trying to grab as much as they could. They were able to grab a few things, family photos, the family Bible, and a couple of guns that were right by the door that they were able to grab. Mm-hmm. And that was it. This was a fully engulfed flame that had spread quickly and fully engulfed the house.
Well, and obviously, I mean, they called 911, right?
Yes.
Yeah, and the fire department shows up and deals with the fire, but for purposes of what we deal with, one of your first calls will be to your insurance carrier that, hey, I've had a fire. You're supposed to cover me for this fire. How did that call? Well, I don't think people realize, I've dealt with having worked for an insurance company. When there's a fire, it's devastating. You don't have a place to stay. You don't have a change of clothes. It's not like you pack a suitcase for these things. You may not have money for your next meal. I mean, your breakfast just burned up in this house fire. So you need food, clothing, and shelter, and your insurance carrier is supposed to step in and provide that for you. What happened when he contacted his insurance carrier?
Yeah, that's absolutely right, Matt. And for this particular one, this is February when this fire occurs. It's the middle of the night. I mean, it's freezing
Extremely
cold outside,
right.
freezing cold, and the wind's howling, and our client and his daughter and uncle are out on the street with nothing but what they grabbed and the clothes on their back. That's all they had left after this. I mean, this was a full, total loss. And so, yes, you're right. He made 2 calls that night. It was a 911 call, obviously, right away. And then later on, after the firefighters were there and our client is out, that's when he called the insurance company. In fact, he didn't get in contact with anyone that night at the insurance company. His initial contact with them was a phone call the next day, the next afternoon.
Sure. And what happened when he starts that process What did the insurance company do for him?
Well, really the first thing right away, what they wanted to do was get a recorded statement from him about what had happened. This is a guy who had obviously been through a traumatic experience the night before, was there at the home until at least 3 a.m., and went back to the home the next morning about 6 a.m. So, he's got a lot going on here. He's dealing with the leftovers of scrap of his life. Really.
Right.
His life totally turned upside down.
Completely, in such an unexpected way. You never think it's going to be you that your house is going to burn down.
Never.
Right.
And so, really, I think right away what he was expecting was, with this call with the insurance company was, let's get, our initial needs taken care of. Let's get a hotel room for the daughter. Let's get those things. Instead, the phone call didn't go that way. It was, a recorded statement made by an adjuster who is experienced in these claims, trying to gather information from him,
Right.
really without him realizing it.
And
To use against him.
yeah, and later you would learn that they were trying to gather evidence against him at this point, which isn't always what is happening with your insurance company, but when it does, there's some pretty bad consequences. And I can remember you talking about this case when it came in pretty early on. They hired an investigator to go out and take a look. And what did that investigator find?
Yeah, so 4 days after the fire, the insurance company's investigator comes to the home and does a cause and origin investigation. And, obviously he didn't see any of the fire. He wasn't there when it happened. He's putting this together afterwards. And so he does his cause and origin investigation and concludes that there was gasoline on the floor in a specific room of the home, and that's where the fire started and then spread and engulfed the rest of the home.
Now, where he said the fire started, is that where our client noticed the fire at first?
No. So our client first found the fire up in the attic, as I described before. That was where the flames were found, and the investigator was claiming that the fire had begun on the floor of a back porch room. It was kind of on the south side of the home in the back.
Right. And we do this a lot with experts in our line of work. They come out and they look through evidence and they gather some facts, and then they reach a scientific conclusion based on those facts. But if you can sort of undercut those facts, then you can kind of undercut their opinion. And so how did you approach this expert?
Well, first, we gather all of the materials that he relied on. And just as you mentioned, we get details on what investigation he did do. And so as a part of that, there are manuals on these things, how to properly conduct a cause and origin investigation. And there were many holes in that investigation. He failed to, for instance, properly secure the scene. We had these 4 days between the fire and the inspection where you have no idea what happened in there, right? And then another big one was he failed to talk to any of the eyewitnesses. He didn't talk to any of these first responders who were there. He didn't talk to the uncle who found the flame in the attic. And so those were things that were in his own manual that said this is the proper way to do this, and he failed to do so.
You mentioned a first responder. How soon after the 911 call occurred did the first responders get to the scene?
The first one was about 4 minutes later,
So
and that was an
extremely
ambulance.
quick. Yeah.
Yes.
Yeah, and so we're going to talk more about in our second segment how to poke holes in expert testimony, and then we're going to talk about the lawsuit that was filed in this case. You're going to be surprised who actually filed it. That is it for our first segment of Tell Me I Have a Case. We're back in a few moments talking with Jacob Lawrence about whether your insurance company really has your best interest at heart.
Cook, Barquette, Ponder, and Walls are very proud of the results they obtain for their clients, but you should know that past results afford no guarantee of future results, that every case is different and must be judged on its own merits, and that the choice of a lawyer is an important decision and should not be based solely on advertisements. And now, back to Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn.
And welcome back to segment 2 of Tell Me I Have a Case, the show where we invite you to take a second look at the world of personal injury law. I'm Matt Glenn, along with Dan Grimm. Today we have Jacob Lawrence, one of our partners, in the studio with us, talking about whether or not your insurance company really does have your best interest in mind. And Jacob, in segment 1, we were talking about the expert witness that the insurance company hired to try to explain to your client that the house fire was in fact his fault, or that perhaps he set it. And you indicated that there was some parts of the investigation the expert had done, but experts are scientists. They have procedures they're supposed to follow. And what of his procedures did you find he just didn't follow?
Right. I think we touched on this in the first segment. That really the number one thing, and this is again according to the manual that he abides by, is the number one thing is talk to all the eyewitnesses and get a complete picture of who saw this. Because again, he wasn't there at the time. He's coming in later on, And this is an investigator who does this professionally. He is hired by insurance companies to do these investigations. He doesn't do these on for people who are accused of burning their homes down. He only does this for insurance companies, so he knows the conclusion that they want him to have, and that's the conclusion that he reached in this case.
So he says the fire started in one room, but what did the witnesses who got there first say?
Yeah, so the very first witness on scene was the ambulance, as we talked about. It was 4 minutes after the 911 call. And, no firefighters there yet. The ambulance arrived first and went to the owner and said, hey, what can I do to help? Well, it's about this time the owner realizes, the family dog is still in the backyard. So the ambulance driver is the one who goes to the backyard to get the dog out. And at that time, from the way this home is set up, was able to see that the place where the investigator says the fire started was not burning and had not burned yet.
Right.
At the same time, he could see flames in the attic above, right below the roof line. And so that was one of those things. It was such a basic fact that, had that investigator talked to any of the eyewitnesses, he would have known that his conclusion of where the fire started was completely incorrect.
Right.
And during this time, the homeowner believes that the insurance company is looking out for his best interests. Possibly, there's certain obligations that insurance companies have, because obviously he has no clothes, no food, everything he had inside the house has been burned. What's the insurance company doing during this time period to help him out? Because you mentioned this is February; it's cold out.
Oh yeah. You got to look at an insurance policy as a contract. That's what it is. It has obligations for the company as well as the individual. And so you're exactly right. As a part of this contract, as a part of the insurance policy, the insurance company was supposed to provide what's called extra expenses. And this is what we're talking about. It kind of helps you bridge the gap between you lose everything and you're back on your feet. It covers toiletries. It covers get some clothes to just get you by. It covers your motel for a couple of nights. It's just supposed to bridge this gap. And that's one of the obligations that the insurance company had and didn't fulfill at that time.
And did he have a mortgage? Even though the house is burned down, did he still have a mortgage to pay for?
Exactly. So if you look at your homeowner's policy, you have a mortgage, your mortgage holder is also on that policy. They got to protect their interest too in case there's a total loss. And again, under this policy, one of the duties of the insurance company is to pay off that mortgage anytime that there's a total loss. Insurance company failed to do that for over a year, actually. And so through this whole time, through over the year, the mortgage company is then coming after our guy, saying, you need to pay us. Well, it wasn't his obligation at that time under the contract.
And just adds to the extra stress that he's already under.
As if he needed anything else to deal with at that time.
Right.
But a lot of times something like that will happen, and it'll get somebody to come into our office and ask us for help. But that's not exactly the timeline that was filed in this one. How did the lawsuit get initiated in this case?
Yeah, so as we talked about, our client gave this recorded statement, which was the very next day. The insurance company notified him that they were going to be bringing this investigator in at some time. He didn't know when. He wasn't present, by the way, when the investigator went to his home to do the investigation. And about 6 months goes by, and our client is just sitting in limbo. He hasn't received any of this extra expenses. He has lost everything. And then finally, one day, the next thing that he hears from this lawsuit, he thinks maybe his claim's being handled. Maybe the company's going to call him and pay the claim. Instead, the insurance company serves him with a lawsuit.
Oh, wow.
They sued him.
Wow.
That's right. His own insurance company sued him.
Well, he's paid premiums.
Correct.
He's bought this insurance policy. What were they asking him to pay the insurance company?
So the damages that the insurance company was claiming was the expense of what they called is a prolonged claim investigation. Basically hiring this investigator to come in. And then, of course, in addition to that, the attorney's fees to bring the lawsuit.
So in essence, they wanted to deny his claim, and they wanted him to pay them for the investigation to deny his claim.
That's right.
That having worked for an insurance company for 13 years, that astounded me
That's just
when
salt,
you told me that.
Salt in a wound right there.
Yeah, that is cold-blooded. That is awful. So that is what got him into your office. And so, what sort of steps did you take to try to protect him?
Sure. Yeah, and this client was, one of these guys that last thing he wants to do is go see a lawyer for anything.
Yeah.
And when this happens, this is the only choice you have, you know. And so when he came in, we filed an answer to the lawsuit in addition to what's called a counterclaim. And that is basically us claiming the damages, claiming the obligations that the insurance company failed to fulfill under the contract, which then we asserted in this counterclaim.
Okay. So you're both defending the case, and then you're also going on offense, saying, "Hey, by the way, insurance company, you need to do right by this guy."
Exactly. And you see that commonly in contract claims because, like I said, both parties have obligations. They both sue each other. So.
Sure. All right. So what were the damages you were going after then from the insurance carrier?
Well, again, it's the obligations under the policy. There was an obligation to pay for the value of the real property. That's the structure itself, as well as all the contents, all of the personal property. In addition to that, the expenses, the extra expenses that we talked about. And so those were the main damage categories that were provided in the contract, in the policy.
And was there a dispute over what the value of the real property of the building was, as well as a dispute over the value of the contents of the personal property?
Yeah, there was initially. We were able to nip that in through motion work as we were fighting the lawsuit. The insurance company ultimately was the one who set those policy limits. They set the amount that they wanted to insure the property for, both the structure and the contents. And then, of course, they wanted to deny that was what it was worth.
So they were happy to accept the premiums for the higher value, but when it's time to pay, they want to pay as little as possible.
Exactly. Exactly right.
Yeah. You also, I think, had to account for vexatious refusal. If you can, in 90 seconds, describe what vexatious refusal is.
Yeah, it's basically a penalty under a statute in the state of Missouri that allows a claimant to receive an additional penalty against an insurance company when they have refused to pay a claim without a reasonable excuse. That's how the statute reads. And in this case, we claimed that refusal based on the poor investigation that the company did.
Yeah. These are cases that take a significant amount of work. Give the folks at home an idea of how exactly how much. How many? A deposition, that's when you sit down with a witness and you take their sworn statement. Both parties have to be there. How many depositions did you take in this case?
We were close to 30 depositions. Again, it was all of the eyewitnesses. This is a big crew. When you have a fully engulfed house like this, you've got multiple fire agencies there. You've got multiple first responders, firefighters, ambulance. So we brought in all of those eyewitnesses and got depositions from each one to see whether there was any suspicious surroundings of this fire.
Yeah, and that was part of the process too. Did any of them see anything suspicious?
No, nobody saw anything suspicious. Nobody reported anything. And all of those eyewitnesses, again, that's the number one rule when you do a cause and origin investigation. Talk to those eyewitnesses.
Sure. And was there ever a criminal charges brought?
There wasn't. In the state of Missouri, when someone is charged criminally with arson, that's how it works. The first responders say, "Look, this looks suspicious." These guys, they've been around. They're experts in their own right. They can spot something suspicious. They report that to the fire marshal, the state fire marshal. And that's when he comes in and does an unbiased cause and origin investigation. He's not paid there for a simple, certain conclusion.
Right.
He's paid there to figure out what happened.
Right. He's not paid by the insurance company.
That's right. And here, that never happened. The fire marshal was never notified because there was no suspicious surroundings. In addition to that, then the prosecutor decides, well, there's no investigation. I'm not going to bring any charges. So despite all of that, the insurance company decided to go ahead and bring this suit against our client and their insured.
So we had 30 firefighters who had no reason to suspect arson on one side. And on the other side, we had a scientist who was paid by the insurance company who didn't talk to any of the 30 witnesses. And he concluded that it must have been arson. And on that basis, they sued this homeowner down in southeast Missouri.
Yeah, that's right.
Well, all right. So you work on this case for how many years?
We were in litigation about 3 years before we finally got to trial.
Yeah, and this is one part where I'll toot the horn of a firm like ours. During all that time, did you charge the client any money?
No, we didn't.
No. We did this on a contingency fee. And that means that if we win, we do get paid. but if we lose, we get absolutely nothing. And you know, I think it's a privilege to sit next to somebody who has this happen to them, and work with them and fight for them, without telling them, hey, you got to write us a series of checks over those 3 years. Most people can't do that, you know. And so, you know, you were fighting, you were doing God's work in this one. You were really fighting a good fight. This was a fun one to watch. So, the case, how did the case get resolved?
Well, ultimately went to a jury trial. This was really right at the height of COVID, so we jury trials were kind of hard to come by at that time. And the insurance company they pushed it. They pushed it all the way to trial under these circumstances. And so that's what we did. It was 3 days long, and came out favorable for our client.
What about something called motion in limine? What were some of the issues as far as evidence coming in and out? Did you guys argue over what's called motion in limine?
We did, and that's the key to the case. It's pre-trial hearing. A couple of the issues in this one were the prior claims. You know, they wanted to make a big deal about our client having prior claims, which, by the way, was he had had a car stolen in the past. He had had some hail damage to his roof in the past, and he had a rental property, which was out of state actually, and was vacant, and it burned down. And so those were his 3 prior claims, and they kept arguing, you know, make him look like a bad guy.
Right.
He must have burned his house down this time too.
And they knew about all those claims when they wrote the policy, right?
Oh, absolutely.
And accepted his monthly premium checks.
Right.
And even better yet, you know, they investigated those claims. It was the same company, and they paid those claims. And then when they got to this one, they decided, well, let's come up with a good argument and try to paint him in a bad way. And so that was a key motion in limine that you were talking about.
Right.
Yeah. So 3 days at trial. Now, insurance companies have a lot of specialist lawyers. Who did they hire to cover them during this trial?
Yeah, they were specialist lawyers. They travel all around and do these types of what I call arson cases. It's a civil case, and they are hired by the insurance company, and which, by the way, they use the same investigator over and over again.
Yeah.
And these were real experts in trying these cases for the insurance company.
So come work for us. What we'll do is we'll send you out to trial for the very first time against a group of people who've done nothing but what you're about to do, even though you never have. We'll make you wear a mask because of COVID, and then we'll tell you we're not getting paid unless you win. That's a heck of an endorsement for our law firm, Jacob. We really do appreciate you joining us. No, it was a lot of fun to watch you litigate that case because there was a thoroughness to it. Like you said, it took 3 years. I know you were in court on it 4 or 5 times for motions hearings. 30 depositions is just an unbelievably high amount of depositions, and that's a lot of work. It's something you really ought to be very proud of.
We are, and really ultimately the best thing was, finally at the end of the day is seeing our guy get the satisfaction of finding out, hey, the right thing was done eventually.
What was it like when the jury came back and read the verdict? What was the emotion that your client had?
He broke down a little bit. I mean, it was amazing.
It is amazing.
Yeah.
It was a weight lifted off of his shoulders.
Like you said, it's like you're doing God's work because, nobody else can do it.
Well, you got to think of the weight that guy was feeling. I mean, he's taking care of his high school age daughter, and he's worked hard. He's made the right decisions. He's providing for his family, and he's doing so responsibly. He's insuring against a loss like this, and then to be rendered homeless for 3 years, or to have to go find other means of kind of scrambling to kind of catch up for your family. That's just not right. That's not why you buy insurance, and that's why firms like us exist.
That's right. And, the insurance company knows how to do a proper investigation. They know how to do it the right way, and they didn't care. They didn't do it this time.
It's a testament as to why you want to get us involved. As Dan always says, you want us early.
Yes.
So this has been Tell Me I Have a Case, the show where we invite you to take a second look at the world of personal injury litigation. Today we've been talking about your insurance company and whether or not they really have your best interest at heart. Been talking with Jacob Lawrence, our newest partner at Cook, Barkat, Ponder & Wolz. Once again, thanks for joining us.
Thank you, Jacob.
Thanks,
Great
guys.
case.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Tell Me I Have a Case with Dan Grimm and Matt Glenn. If you have questions and need answers, contact Cook, Barkat, Ponder & Wolz today. Just go to cbpw-law.com. See you next week for Tell Me I Have a Case. The choice of a lawyer is an important decision and shouldn't be based solely on advertisements.